Without further ado, our next guest speaker is Petra Sheehan. She was a finalist in the 2008 Bulmers Comedy Competition, which, for those of you who are too young to remember, was the new comedy awards on RTE before the invention of the television. Her topic is Stop Me If You've Heard This Before. Petra Sheehan, ladies and gentlemen.
Stop me if you've heard this before. It's not about plagiarism. Maybe the next time we can talk about that. So because it's not about plagiarism, I'm going to start off with a Stuart Francis joke. Don't worry, I haven't heard of me either. I don't know who I am. Okay, I'll read out the points of the survey that this particular part of the speech references. Irish audiences have become bored with seeing the same acts. Some of the clubs are drawing on a small pool of regular headliners and MCs with fewer opportunities for newer acts to break through. 67% of respondents agreed with this. The second point was there are too few open mic nights where new comics can develop and more experienced acts can try out new material. Comedians feel under pressure to deliver in the established clubs and tend to rely on tried and tested material. This results in a scene that is risk-averse and stagnant. 78% of participants agreed with this. I think both of these points are linked. I think it's difficult to get gigs. When you get gigs, you want to be good. When you're good, you're going to do the material that you've tried before and it's worked. You want to be booked again. You're probably being booked on the strength of a set. You're in the process of writing material and you don't want to jettison an entire set before you've got a new set of material and experiences that you can talk about. In the past 3 years, I haven't been gigging, but I have spent €200 on comedy. I'm audience now at this point. When I'm looking to see, have I seen you before? I'm looking to see when I've seen you before, if I've seen you before. Is there a chance that some of the material will have been repeated? Or have you developed an entirely new set? I'm looking to see if you're local. I'm looking to see if it's an international act, because that's an opportunity to see somebody I won't have seen before, whereas I can pay to go into the Laughter Lounge, or I can pay to see some acts in other smaller independent clubs for less money. So these are concerns that audiences have. I think some points were made earlier by Colin in particular. I think the audience is quite fragmented. I don't think that clubs tend to share the same audience. I think that the people who go to the Vodafone Comedy Festival are a festival audience, really, rather than a comedy audience. You might go to see one particular act, but the people who by and large are going are being sold the festival scene. You can sit in a tent and have beer. It's not about the comedy, actually, particularly for those people, and that's sort of a different strata to the open mic scene, where you have people coming along to see their friends, see their family, see people who they know, people who they've met in the scene. And then you have clubs like your own, where it's in the suburbs, and you probably have a profile where it's older couples who are coming out, and they might. Would you agree? No.
Mainly women between 25 and 30.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's. Yeah, people will talk about audience share and how do we get people out and how do we get people to come back. But I think it's realistic that there's a core group of people who go to everything, and they're called comedians. And then there's everybody else. And those things are... We're not fighting each other for audiences, actually. It's about cultivating. And I think it's about trusting audiences as well and growing it. Somebody who I'd admired when I had started out was Stuart Lee. And he spent a long time building an audience over a period of years. Somebody else who I wouldn't be that familiar with, but who's spoken about the same thing, would be Louis C.K. He spent a long time dying before he got it together and got people to come back and see him. And he changes his material because he knows that the same people come back to see him every year. MCs are a very important part of every gig. I'd agree with that. I think it's very important they tell you what to do if you haven't been to a gig before. Quite often you can see in Dublin at the moment MCs doing the same set, doing the same material in between things. So if you are repeat business and you're not used to coming to comedy, but you see MCs doing the same thing, it detracts from the liveness of the medium. It's the only thing that we have over the internet and telly and a radio or anything else is the fact that we're in the room with the people. It's something that's lost. You don't have to leave home now. You can watch Jimmy Carr, or you can watch, what's that sweaty, twitchy guy who's always on? Lee Evans. You can watch Lee Evans, and you don't have to leave home. people are taking a risk when they come out. But I think what they go away with is the fact that they've sat in a room with you, and it has been a little bit more personal. There have been things that have gone wrong. There have been delays. There have been things that you wouldn't have anticipated, and they're all edited out of the slickly produced shows that you're watching with the perception that it's free. It's not free. You've paid for your television license, of course you have, and you've paid for your box, and you've paid for, or you might have even bought the DVD. But when you're coming out, people are putting their hands in their pockets and they're handing cash over, and they want to go away with something that's tangible and different from just turning on the television and being able to flick. And I think that's risk-taking, and I think that can be different voices through material and that kind of thing. I am going to wrap that up, and we can have a bit of a chat about that.
Petra Sheehan. Oh, anybody? Maxine? Yeah?
Yeah, I just think that all that stuff about it being a shared experience is really so true, and that's what's going to get people back again. I mean, there's been a few times at the Wicked Wolf where there's been a feeling, this is a new material night in Black Rock, where there's been a feeling that we've all been witnessing something quite new and unusual. We had it with Cat Horan, and there weren't that many in the room, but there was a spontaneous round of applause because people were recognising, oh, this is something new, this is something quirky, this is something good. And everyone goes away and feels that they've shared something and, you know, just really been part of a comedy experience. And I think that is very good, and especially about the MC as well, making them feel that everything's new and this is just them and it's a unique experience. Yeah.
I just mind what you were saying about the take-home part of it. I mean, Colin gives that ice cream at the Crunch, and that gets people in. Even well, no, I know. Like I used to work in the Guinness Storehouse, and we used to have a lot of people come through, and that was what they used to say to us was one of the things that made them notice it per se. At first,
recent years,
not so much.
They're surprised when the ice cream like there actually is ice cream.
Yeah, but we did a panel show. Were true. We did a panel show here called Eat Cake, and we had like 50 people show up because there's going to be cake. Whereas when people try to do drinks promotions, I think people who show up for drinks promotions are there to drink, and I think so many people make that mistake because that's not inclusive. That's something that, you can get anywhere. So if people are going to put on a gig, look differently for the thing that experience they can take home with them. Yeah.
We need more confectionery-based marketing as well. I think everybody agrees on that. Any other questions?
Can I make a comment on what Petra just said?
Yeah, sure.
I know she's talking, and I know because I'm a recent mum myself, so I'm audience a lot of the time too. I remember when I was back being a promoter, and comedians coming in that were really funny, and then having seen them again, and they may not have done the same set, and you'd love to have heard that same set being, they have the pressure of other comedians going, oh fuck, it's this stuff again, and all you see is the exodus to the door because you've done the same set more than twice or three times. I think that's a terrible shame when somebody's getting good. I do think that. I mean, and I don't think you're always going to have the same audience every show you do.
Yeah, I think in a way there's kind of two issues there. Is that the first one is that at a certain point in somebody's career, they're expected not to mess up, and they're expected to have a polish act, and they rely a lot. I mean, I know there's certainly comedians I know who were doing comedy in the 90s who were still doing the same, more or less the same stuff. They've got some new stuff, but they're relying on stuff from back in the 90s. And it's good stuff, don't get me wrong. And on the other hand, there are people, there's nowhere for somebody to, I'll be honest, it's I got a lot of responses from the survey, and initially I just asked people what is the biggest challenge you face in terms as a promoter or a comedian. And one person in particular mentioned the fact that they had gone along to the Battle of the Axe to do some new stuff, and that they when they came off, there was a promoter in the room who said, don't even think about calling me about a gig because that was rubbish. And you're going, okay, so where do I do, if I'm not doing new stuff in the Battle of the Axe and feeling the pressure of being judged on that, where is it that I'm going to do, and the alternative to the Battle of the Axe, to my mind, is any new club that's opening up that nobody knows about, which means you're in front of 4 or 5 people. Unless things, unless you take something from what Colin was saying and what Chris was saying about how to build, and Abie indeed about promoting yourself, those are the alternatives. The Battle of the Axe is the long-standing 18 years running kind of effectively a place for people to start out. But at this stage, if somebody's not quite on the next rung of the ladder and they have to shit themselves over what they're going to say in the Battle of the Axe, then I think it's a sign that things are not very healthy. So, I think you can kind of look at both sides there, Margot, is my point. Does anybody else got anything to add? No?
Can I add something, though?
You can, yeah.
I was talking about watching audiences and not particularly wanting to pay to see the same thing again. I have to, as somebody who's watched comedians develop and evolve, I quite like that. It's just, if I'm putting my hand in my pocket and I know the 3 other people on the bill, chances are I'm not going to pay to do that. But I think it's lovely when you do watch someone struggle with an awkward bit and then find a way of making it work. I think that's good. I think that's part of the community that is comedy, is kind of going, how is he going to get that to work? And then he does eventually. And I think that is good. That is good work. But there are fewer opportunities for that to happen when people are more conservative and they want guaranteed laughs. And even topically, I think people are even editing themselves at this point and kind of going, well, I'm not going to do my rape stuff, and we can forget about the abortion gag because that's not going to go down well. So this kind of thing happens and that sort of in itself is stymieing and leading to a sameness of the quality of things. But I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. I think there are people who are out there, but it's something that's happening as a result of there being less gigs, as a result of there being less people to pay to watch them. Yeah.
So, Mark, hand ready?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, though, when you're saying about that you won't go and see a comedian if you've seen them before and it might be the same stuff, I think that'd be kind of the difference between a comedy connoisseur and somebody who just kind of goes to the odd gig here and there. Because I think the odds that if you go and see a gig, somebody in the Battle of the Axe or the International or whatever, unless you're regularly going back, the chances that you're going to be playing to that person again in the near future, unless they're like a real hardcore comedy fan, is pretty slim. So I think I don't think the general public are turned off by comedians doing the same material over and over, because I don't think the general public know that comedians are doing it the same over and over because they're only seeing the guy once.
Anecdotally, I have heard somebody behind me in a festival kind of going, I paid a lot less to see this guy 3 weeks ago in another venue. That has happened, but I'd agree with you in general. I think there are people who are connoisseurs of comedy, people who would watch it and spend a long time and it's their life, and then there are people who go to comedy now and again. And I think those two things, they do operate independently. And what can you do? The end.
Round of applause for Petra Sheehan and for the contributions there. Great stuff. Well, we've come to the last of our guest speakers tonight, who's Kat Horan, all the way from Buffalo, New York. And I hear she rocked the shit out of the Wicked Wolf last night. So let's give her a big round of applause for Kat Horan. And her speech will be entitled Coming Together, Building a Comedy Community. Kat Horan.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for hanging in there, guys. My topic is the importance of growing and building a comedy community. I genuinely feel that a fair few of the issues that Dublin faces as a comedy scene stem from its lack of an open mic, and therefore its lack of a comedy community. I think it's important to first define the difference between an open mic and an open mic spot, an open spot on a show. And there's a few key differences there. The first one is it's lower expectations from your audience as an open micer. And the second is less time expected from you. And the final thing is just less pressure all around as a whole. I think, put simply, like, going up at an open mic is where you work out. And when you go onto a show, that's where you kind of show off what you've been working on. In my experience, I had to prove myself consistently at open mics before I was even asked to do an open spot, which is only, 7 minutes anyway. So that is the difference between the open mic and the open spot. Now, I feel like there are many benefits to having an open mic in Dublin, and I could focus on lots of them, but I kind of decided to just stick with one, and that is pride. I feel like this is the most important component of a successful comedy community, and it doesn't exist without this. I was fortunate enough to start doing stand-up in Buffalo, New York, as Aidan told you. And when I came in, there was already a strong comedy community in place. And this community was started by a woman named Kristen Becker. And she put in lots of time and effort to create this community. And she just created a lot of strong people who were really into their scene. But being Buffalo and the fact that we're just 8 hours away from New York City, we lose comedians every year to New York City, just like comedians from Dublin are lost to London. And yet this scene still manages to thrive despite these strong individuals who leave. And I think what I see in Dublin, at least from an outsider, is a lot of very confident individuals who are proud to be comedians, but very few comedians who are proud of their comedy scene. And I think this is what Dublin is lacking. Now, obviously, it's really easy to point out all the issues, but I'd like to kind of propose what I think we should do. I feel like it's a little bit inappropriate that I'm making the suggestions because I've only been at it 2.5 years, and I'm American, coming over here telling you guys what to do. But yes, it is. So here we go. I think the first thing to do is to start an open mic. Simply just one open mic in a pub that is popular on its own. With or without, like, people are not going there just because of the entertainment. They're going there because it is a good destination to hang out. And they don't care if there's music on, they don't care if there's comedy on. They just want to go to this pub. I think that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we provide a comedy class. Actually, part of the way I was able to get Kristen Becker to notice me as a comedian who was just starting out was by taking her comedy class. And what I realized was with this comedy class that she did is not only did it kind of teach people the basics and help her out by getting a little extra income, it also brought new people into it. And new people bring audience because they don't know yet that that's a bad idea. And they also bring enthusiasm, which is something that comedians who've been at it a while start to lose, or they go through cycles of like being bitter and angry and then happy again. So that is the real importance of the comedy class. Now, I don't feel like I am someone who would be doing that. I really think it should be someone who's been at it a few years, who's a working comedian, and has made like some sort of a living at it. And specifically someone who's made it in Dublin or done well in Dublin. The third thing I propose is that we work with improv groups and burlesque troupes because these people are part of our comedy community and we need to work all together to make this community strong. And the final thing we do is we make more open mics at really different rooms, specifically focusing on a club room where you have to be very professional, and also a cafe where you have to be somewhat cleaner because it's a different kind of clientele, and where we can access younger comedians. Just an hour outside of Buffalo is a city called Rochester, and most of their open mics happen in the Boulder Cafe, and there is nothing more humbling than following a 13-year-old.
I follow many 13-year-olds. That's when there are barriers.
But these people now are coming out to comedy. These friends from this guy, little boy from high school or middle school, is coming out. And he's bringing his friends. And even though that sounds like an odd audience group, it's someone that, it's people that aren't out all the time that we need to tap into. And the last place I propose we start an open mic is a rowdy room, which I know sounds like hell, but that is the best place to learn how to deal with heckle handles and to work on crowd work and just get used to dealing with an audience that doesn't have respect for you and to gain their attention and their respect throughout the show. So that's just what I have to say. Any questions?
Kat Horan, everybody. Any questions for Kat?
I have a quick one. What's the population of Buffalo?
I know this. The population of Buffalo City is somewhere around 535,000. I looked it up because I had this conversation with Kat, and she said that it's approximately the same size as Dublin. So it's the same size as the metropolitan area of Dublin.
I will just say it has a lot less going for it. You guys have tourism. The only tourists we get are people who are lost on their way to Niagara Falls. Most of the people in the U.S. don't even know that Buffalo is in the U.S., and it's just super poor. We didn't even deal with the recession because we were already fucked before it came to us. So that's hard.
I guess my question is, like, it's already a struggle to get people to come to actual comedy clubs. Where would we find the audience to come to open mic nights where the standard is, by definition, I think, a bit lower? That's my only question, is how do you get people to come to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wasn't in Buffalo at the beginning, so I don't know how my mentor did it. But I get the feeling that it is really to get those new comedians in and get their friends to come out. And this will go through cycles, but overall, you have to start making a name for yourself as a good night. Now, obviously, an open mic is going to be amateur, but there's just moments of brilliance, and if someone is able to set up a good lineup and know the people who are coming in, minus the few new people, they'll be able to set it up so that it's still a good night out, even though it is like new material and new people. I think it's just a science and an art.
Of whether Ed Salmon or whatever, it can work. You know what I mean? It's you still have to give the audience substance. You know what I mean? But they'll be willing to put up with the middle part if they know there's going to be a payoff at the end.
I think the biggest thing too is to have people who are enthusiastic and kind of have like a delusional kind of faith. In the area, because like I absolutely couldn't stand Buffalo when I first lived there, and that last 6 months of doing comedy really was like not only changed my life and what I decided to do with it, but also, you know, just made me love that city. It's where I call home, even though I was born like nowhere near Buffalo.
I feel like Americans do delusional faith really, really well. I feel we're more good at, like, drunken cynicism as people. We're sort of like, because you've won quite a lot of wars in your history and won Olympic gold medals, whereas we've had the shit kicked out of us repeatedly and occasionally win a medal for punching women in the head. I mean, that's, I don't know. That's my experience.
We need to tap into the vein of all of that kind of hysteria around moving statues in Knock.
Sorry.
That's the sort of delusional faith that we could really channel. I think the fact that Column is running the gig where they have a bucket at the end is the fact that that's one of the most successful clubs is no mistake. We've been conditioned over, you know, decades of capitalism, or not capitalism, but Catholicism, which is more or less the same thing, to contribute to the bowl as it goes around. Yeah. I suggest doing it twice. Say one of them is about a roof or something. You can raise a lot of money that way.
I just wanted to briefly, just on that, mention like the experience of flyering in towns in Ireland versus the experience of flyering in say Boston. Like in Boston, you'll get people going, "Oh my God, you wrote the show yourself? We got to go see this guy. He came over from Ireland. And they're so enthusiastic with the idea that you can make it, and they're going to see you. And in Ireland, it's like outside of Dublin, and like particularly if you're doing festivals in town centres in places in the Midlands, it's like, what the fuck is culture? Why is it? You sounds good, like you wrote it, you fucking prick. It's literally that level of like enthusiasm of who the fuck do you think you are? Fuck you, you're not in telly. Is more or less what you encounter. So I do think there's a slight issue culturally around that. But I'm not saying we can't change it or challenge it, and I'm quite happy to do that. I just want to put that in there.
Any questions? Yeah, Mark Hanroddy?
I think a lot of it, Abie, when you say, I think we're very good at doing cynicism, and I think there's that sort of, there's a bitterness towards people that make it big. Like kind of a jealousy type thing, but there's also a disdain for people that haven't made it big, because the assumption is that they must not be very good if they haven't made it big. So I think those are kind of the sort of challenges, that if like it's only an open mic slot, like, you know, only an open mic slot, that a lot of people think that it must not be any use.
Thanks, Kat. I think what you said in relation to the burlesque scene is very valid as well. I think if you look at somewhere like London, which is obviously a much bigger population, obviously the audience is very diverse there as well, but there's avenues there for comedy to be explored, and it's sort of more of a crossover market. It's a scene that has a foothold here at the moment. Another scene that would be quite similar, would there be an overlap to, would be spoken word, where again there'd be less pressure. There's not a requirement to be funny, but it's an opportunity to do something, and perhaps elements of those being incorporated. I just had a horrible vision of Aidan in nipple tassels. That's what
I know some girls in Galway who might be able to hook me up with those tassels. So
I did just think also in Buffalo there was a storytellers hour that was started kind of because of the moth. It was inspired by that. So, and that gets a different draw. Now I don't know how successful it ended up being, but it's just tapping into different audiences and working together to build a community, which is really what we want to do.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of the panellists. Could you a big round of applause for all the panellists who spoke today? And I'd like to thank Gabriel and Tom and Peter and Paul, and John as well for helping out with the sound here today. He's recording this. We may be following us up with some kind of podcast or other. I had hoped we would have a little bit more time for discussion at the end. I'm suggesting that if people want to make their way over to the beautiful surroundings of the check-in, we might reconvene there in a more informal capacity. Once again, a big thank you to all the people who came here today. And if you could clap in unison, I know you're not used to being an actual audience. And I would like to say it was difficult to put this together, and I'm very grateful to those who turned out as well to support it. There were a lot of people who, going back to the point about cynicism, had lots of ideas and had lots of things to say about this, but were scared that it might degenerate into a slagging match and the usual kind of axes to grind. So hopefully I'm going to be posting about this on Facebook, and if you could just put the word out that nobody died, and there was, even though we were talking about a serious topic, there was occasional laughs. Give yourselves a big round of applause, because audience is very important if we remember one thing for tonight.